Years ago, one of our fleet elders said something that stuck with me. You guys hear me okay back there? Okay, thank you for that, brother. He said, everybody's got a rock up here with their name on it. And if you fish long enough, you're going to find it. Or it's going to find you. So this is the story of finding my rock. I was 13 when the Willie Lee II became a mother-daughter operation. Commercial fishing was something my parents and I had done as a team. I didn't understand that our family of 3 had become a broken pair. 6 years into our lives as trollers, it had been a struggle. My dad didn't believe we'd be able to make a living fishing, so he got a land job. Because we couldn't afford to lose his steady paycheck, he stayed south while my mom took the helm. At least, that's the way my folks told it to me. It was easier to say we were poor than to admit my parents' marriage had found its rock. As soon as the school year wrapped up in June, my mom and I started our trip north, Anacortes to Sitka. We were rushing to fish some early openings, shake out the gear before our season opened July 1st. My mom divided the wheel watches between us so we could run straight through the nights. 2 mornings in, she shook me awake at 5. "Let me show you where we are," she said, standing at the chart table. I was on the cusp of an ugly adolescence that summer, and early mornings whetted the blaze of my bad attitude. So when my mom wanted to go over the chart with me, I waved her away and snapped, I know where we are." When she lay down in the bunk behind me, my body relaxed. Moments like those allowed the fantasy that the Willie Lee was my ship and I was alone at sea. As daybreak peeled back the night's skin, faint shadows broke into land, far away, with a vast ocean between us. An island emerged to our starboard, on the farthest lip of the horizon. The radar and my bleary eyes agreed there were no other boats around. Everything looked good. Moments later, my head nodded to my chest. I want to tell you about the Willie Lee, a 54-foot fiberglass double-ender. She was only 4 years old, a baby in boat years. My folks had found her as a bare hull in Port Townsend. The man building his retirement cruiser had fallen ill from the glass, and when my parents offered him a piece of waterfront property in Petersburg as a trade, he agreed. In the fall of 1987, we parked a broken-down motorhome outside the barn housing this giant canoe. My parents didn't know it was impossible to bring a boat from bare skeleton to fishable, seaworthy life in 9 months, so that's what they did. It was a fanatical gestation, rising at dawn and collapsing in the camper late into the night every day for 9 months. To launch and get to Alaska in time for our season. And as spring bled into summer, some things got rushed. Things like, instead of building a settee, they bought a picnic table from Costco and bolted it to the cabin floor. And some things got overlooked entirely, like installing a watch alarm. Lacking that beeping safety net escalating to siren alarm, some might credit a guardian presence, some sort of divine intervention. Me, I can't explain how my mom and I simultaneously leapt up from sound sleeps to see rocks and trees. Before and since, 7 knots has never felt so fast. I don't remember sound, can't tell you if either of us gasped, cried out in shock, or screamed F. I remember my mom flinging herself at the throttle, slamming us into neutral, then reverse, in a desperate effort to turn back, but was already in irretrievable motion, throwing one arm across my chest, as if bracing for a car's screeching impact. Mostly I remember rocks. The Willie Lee ground to a halt. The tide was ebbing, exposing a stone-shouldered shoreline that curled, swan-like, into the cliffs we nestled against. The air smelled of the pine trees topping our cradle, their cheery scent an obscenely abrupt shift from the brine we'd been breathing. This was no easily overlooked shallow spot in the midst of open ocean. No timid rock playing peekaboo through the sea to gaze at the stars. The rock with my name on it, in fact, already had its own name. The Willie Lee sat on an actual island, Addenbrooke Island. Not only did our perch have an identity, it had inhabitants. I had run us aground in the only staffed lighthouse-bearing island within 70 miles. A good storyteller brings her audience into a scene, shares what happened along with the accompanying smells and sounds and thoughts. I can't do that because I remember little of what followed. I can't tell you what it felt like to fall asleep an impatient, ill-mannered teenager and wake up a guilty child. This was the first time in my life where I truly effed up. The kind of blunder that carries consequences like I'd never known before and wouldn't fully grasp for years. My mom tells me I sobbed, certain I'd ruined our season. She stepped into disaster mode, directing me to lower the skiff. She told me I'd have to row around the island and wake the people in the lighthouse up to tell them we were there. I looked at her with frightened eyes and asked if there would be bears. I can't tell you what it felt like, dropping our man overboard ladder over the port rail and climbing down the rungs. Hearing the scrape of barnacles under my boots as I strapped a life jacket on and stepped into the gray Zodiac. Watching the boat my parents created, practically my sibling, fade in the distance, a beached behemoth growing smaller with each clumsy oar stroke. How the dock bounced beneath me after I tied the skiff, or how baffled the lighthouse keepers were, answering a 6 a.m. knock to find a small, teary-eyed girl on their island doorstep. I can tell you they were gracious. The woman cooked us breakfast. My mom did not eat. As the tide retreated, the Willie Lee listed hard over. Her starboard pole mingled with hemlock and spruce, as if seeking a return to its own rooted origins. Remarkably, the prop and rudder appeared undamaged. It seemed we might sneak past true fiasco, but when all the Willie Lee's 43-ton weight settled against a single pointy rock, the spire pierced the fiberglass below the forecastle floorboards. By mid-afternoon, the tide floated us upright. A float plane and several Canadian fishermen delivered water pumps, and 2 men joined us on board. We began a slow jog to Shearwater, a village 40 miles north with a boatyard and hoist big enough for our hefty girl. After everything that I don't remember of that day, this here is where my memory kicks in. 10 miles in, one of the pumps went out. Salt water immediately welled over the stateroom floor and began licking up the stairs. When one of the men exclaimed, "We're gonna lose her," my mom barked, "No, we're not." She dove into the forecastle, buckets in hand. 5 gallons at a time, she flung them up to me, throwing the ocean out the cabin window until the men got another pump going. We made it to Shearwater. Tied to the dock, pumps growled all night, cycling water back out as quickly as it flooded in. before we got hauled the next morning. Evaluating our injuries, the boatyard guys determined that sometimes things have to be made worse before they can be made better. They sliced out the ragged fist punched through the Willie Lee's belly, carving a smooth new cavity big enough to walk through. For the next 10 days, my mom spurred them to work faster, to stay later, to get us patched and back underway. Daily treks to Shearwater's lone restaurant kept them plied with pizza and beer. She labored tirelessly alongside them, perhaps hoping chauvinism would inspire a greater work ethic and their constant reminders of our impending opening. My mom subscribed to the belief that anything that happens aboard a ship is ultimately the captain's responsibility. She gave me absolution, assuring me I wasn't to blame. Apparently, I took her assurances to heart, because as my mom sweated over glass and resin, I focused on a boy. Donnie was 16 and had just returned from boarding school in Victoria. I was captivated by his broad grin, long black hair, and sepia eyes, and he was intrigued to find an unfamiliar girl in his hometown of 50 residents. When he asked my age, I fibbed myself 2 years older. Casually abandoning ship, I spent hours in his battered Ford truck, reveling in the thrill of that first reciprocated crush, bouncing up old logging roads. On one of these rides, a long-legged wolf leapt into our path, pausing to fix a golden stare before bounding into the forest. Back at the boat, I couldn't wait to share about this encounter. The boatyard guys nudged each other in a way I didn't understand, snorting that I'd been riding with a wolf. Shearwater was a place of conflicting time zones. My mom's sleepless ordeal slogged by, while my first romance danced past mambo quick. 10 days, and $43,000 later. The Willie Lee splashed, tethered to the dock to confirm her shiny new skin was watertight. If it held through the night, we'd be back underway to Alaska at dawn. Years later, I would be an old pro at leaving sweethearts. When the salmonberry began to bloom, I'd sense the soil shifting beneath my feet and know that it's time to head back to sea, regardless of anyone sharing my nights. But in Shearwater, I'd just learned what it was to feel someone's gaze like sunshine on my face. I hadn't yet learned how to say goodbye. Donnie was a good teacher. We sat in the lobby of the restaurant feeling time slip by until he picked up my hand and pulled me to my feet. Come on. He led me to the side exit the staff used for their smoke breaks. We sat on the wooden steps under a skyscape of stars so brilliant they blotted out the blackness behind. He traced my cheek with a fingertip and tilted my face to his. I interrupted my first kiss, whispering, I have to tell you something. I'm 13. He chuckled, liar, and pulled me back. The Willie Lee's new scan proved seaworthy, and we did indeed get underway at dawn. We made it to Sitka in time for the July 1st King opening. My folks split up the following year. Though my mom went on to skipper the Willie Lee for another 6 years, my dad ended up being right. Ultimately, they weren't able to make it fishing. A couple bad seasons right after she sank everything into an expensive refrigeration system, and my mom had to return to land herself, selling the boat that had been my parents' final creation together. I couldn't help wonder how the story might have been different without that crash landing and the expense of our repairs. It's been 26 years since I found my rock. I'm the only one in my family still fishing. My partner Joel and I have our own trawler, the Nurka. She has a healthy watch alarm, and I don't hesitate to turn it on. But I think about all the other rocks and lives all the other rocks in life, the ones that there are no watch alarms for, the ones that we hit over and over again, and the challenge of learning how we'll respond when we run aground. And I think of my mom, of the gift she gave me, a grace I took without question and have rarely returned, and hope that I'll one day learn to do the same. Thank you.